Greetings, humans of the internet. Welcome once again to Bowtie Talks. I, of course, am your excellent host, Luke Johnson, coming to you, as always, from my undisclosed location in Midwest USA. And I thought that since the last episode was amusement parks would be a logical next step. Because, after all, summer is getting closer, and you usually find roller coasters in amusement parks. So step right up, folks, and I hope you have your turkey legs and funnel cakes ready as we venture into a great American institution, the amusement park. And once again, as in most cases of American history, we have to look to the motherland, Europe. Early ancestors of theme parks popped up in Europe around the time of the Renaissance, which took place from 1300s. These festivals were typically centered around religious holidays and harvests, and people gathered to enjoy food and admire exotic wares brought from faraway lands. And if you wanted to take a ride, you'd sit in a basket and be spun around a pole in what might be considered an early iteration of the modern carousel. And hand-eye coordination was tested through games that included hurling javelins through rings as well as archery and darts. Crowds gathered to watch knights show off their horsemanship through jousting, which can also still be enjoyed at modern Renaissance fairs. And during the 18th century, pleasure gardens sprung up in major cities in Europe to entertain the rising middle class. With excess cash to spend and newfound leisure time, citizens were ready to be entertained. And at these pleasure gardens, visitors could stroll through manicured grounds and enjoy live music, acrobats, plays, jesters, and fireworks shows. They became places for people to socialize and play games with others that people might not encounter in everyday life, all while showing off their best clothes. Local architects would reveal their latest creation, and artists exhibited their finest works, creating a way for the general public to view art pieces that would otherwise have been kept out of the public eye. By the mid-1700s, news of the fun of pleasure gardens had traveled across the pond, and the concept took hold in America. First pleasure garden opened in America in New York City in 1767, and it was called Vauxhall Gardens. And in 1799, it became home of the first carousel to ever open in this country. However, America was a bit late to catch on with amusement parks in terms of attractions and rides and such. And for such attractions, we have to look a bit later in the century. The explosion of amusement parks in the late 19th and early 20th century happened mostly because of urbanization. As cities began to swell with new residents, young people from all different backgrounds began looking for new ways to entertain themselves. And this brought on a new era of industrial capitalism, which in turn created an urban working class which was able to spend time and money on leisure. The first time ever, it seemed as though more people had time to enjoy themselves. These private businesses were major buyers of electric power, and many of them grew frustrated paying the same high electric costs to power their trolleys even on the weekends when fewer people were riding. And so these business owners provided these new urban masses with new destinations, using what they already had on hand, electricity and streetcar technology. And so to draw passengers, these trolley companies and occasionally beer brewers or an entrepreneur with a wild streak opened electrified parks at the end of trolley rail lines. In cities often still lit largely by gaslight, these trolley parks, as they were called, lured crowds with towers of incandescent light bulbs and primitive rides such as scenic railways, which were early forms of roller coasters that could hurl thrill seekers around curves at 45 miles an hour. Quite something. Some of the early people to go to these trolley parks might also have encountered rides like the Shoot the Chutes water ride, be thrown about on a bump the bump slide and be hurled around on the human pool table. Where, according to a newspaper report from the time, people are spun around like tops to land on the bottom of a soft mattress with only the loss of dignity. One trolley park has gone down in the history books as one of the most famous amusement parks ever, and that, of course, is Coney Island, which was the result of a well-thought-out rail line. After a long week of work and school, families viewed Coney Island as an affordable way to escape to the seaside during the summers. Rides, games, fortune tellers, and street performances sprang up to delight people who came to visit. And in 1884, the switchback gravity pleasure was invented by Lamarcus Thompson, which became the first roller coaster in the United States, as we talked about last episode. And the roller coaster inspired entrepreneurs to build multiple parks on Coney Island, which is still famous for its rides and games. Coney Island became a hub of amusement park rides. Roller coasters were often invented and built elsewhere, then sent to Coney Island. People would gather their friends and families on weekends, ride in from the other suburbs on the subway, and snack on a hot dog between rides. While Coney Island was experiencing success, Chicago, Illinois also became famous for its amusement parks. In 1893, architects and those in charge of the Columbia Exposition, which was a fair attended by guests from all over the world, were looking to create something spectacular enough to rival the Eiffel Tower, which had been showcased just a few years before. And for that, they turned to a man named George Washington Gale Ferris Jr., who created something called the Ferris wheel, which debuted at the Columbian Exposition. Yes, the Ferris wheel was named after the man who invented it. It was a 260-foot behemoth of a ride that welcomed over 1.4 million guests in its carriages over the next 5 months. The exposition also debuted the idea of signature colors, fonts, and whimsical designs being specific to a particular amusement park. Meanwhile, a showman named Paul Boynton made a reputation for himself after completing a series of water challenges and performing in P.T. Barnum's circus. And after settling down in Chicago, Boynton established the country's first amusement park called Boynton's Water Chutes in 1894. And the success of the park inspired him to open a second amusement park on Coney Island. The amusement park industry boomed throughout the early 1900s, and by the 1920s, there were hundreds of parks across the country. The rise in industrialization and more efficient transportation allowed workers to work for less time, allowing more time for leisure. Ride engineers raced to build roller coasters, and the competition among the engineers was fierce. Advertisements were full of superlatives like tallest, fastest, and longest to attempt to lure people to each park's grounds. However, the success would eventually come to a halt. The Great Depression caused an economic downturn in the global economy, which led to the closure of hundreds of amusement parks worldwide. World War II followed in 1939, which meant time and resources needed to be spent on wartime efforts rather than building the next best ride. Although some people did visit amusement parks to escape from the harsh reality of everyday life, the industry struggled to attain the same success it had experienced during the previous decades. And the rise of the amusement park gave way to another concept, the theme park. That is to say, an amusement park that revolved around a central theme or idea. And believe it or not, Disneyland was not the first to do so. Although the town was originally called Santa Fe, the town of Santa Claus, Indiana selected its new name in the 1850s. The U.S. Post Office refused to grant the borough a post office because another town in Indiana had the same name, so the town of Santa Fe, Indiana became Santa Claus, Indiana. As the only post office named Santa Claus in the entire country, the town began receiving thousands of letters from children writing their holiday messages to Santa, and the postmaster, helped by local volunteers, worked to answer the letters from children all over the country. And in the early 1940s, an industrialist named Louis J. Koch of Evansville, Indiana, bought 260 acres of land to create an amusement park to leverage the town's unique name. And Santa Claus Land opened in 1946, and it offered a dreamy alpine village with a toy shop, rides that were designed especially for children, and daily appearances from Santa Claus himself. And Santa Claus Land became the first true theme park in America. A man named Jim Yelig portrayed Santa Claus at the park for 4 decades, and the park has thrived from the 1950s until the present day. However, in 1980, the park added Halloween and the 4th of July as additional holidays, and then changed the park's name to the more appropriate Holiday World. And in 1993, the Koch family added a water park called Splash and Safari. Over the years, the park added several wooden roller coasters, and it continues to offer free sunscreen and soft drinks. The park added Thanksgiving as a theme in 2006. And now that does bring us to Disneyland, which might be considered the second true theme park. The theme was the fantasy world of Walt Disney and his characters, which the park divided into Adventureland, Fantasyland, Frontierland, and Tomorrowland. But Disney's creation bore a secondary theme out of the ideal of an American municipality. You find yourself in a bygone time, another world, says the announcer on the opening day of Disneyland. The clock has turned back half a century, and you're now in the main square of a small American town. And Disneyland itself might have been seen as kind of a novelty at the time. It was a misfit in the family of amusement parks. It was a relatively straight-laced, conservative child in a family of earthy eccentrics. Park designers got rid of the dangerous allure of the old urban parks, replacing them with a milder, family-friendly amusements. None of the high-speed coasters or thrill rides that now anchor the park were part of the original Disneyland. Taming the rides wasn't the only way Disneyland divided itself from traditional amusement parks. A dress and appearance code was enforced across the park, which banned mustaches and beards on employees and prohibited male visitors with long hair. In 1964, the future Birds frontman Jim McGuinn wasn't allowed in due to his Beatles-esque hairdo. And alcohol was out of the question. No liquor, no beer, nothing, Disney once said. However, a few months after Walt Disney died, the rule was relaxed for the VIP-only Club 33. And only in 2019 did Disneyland get 2 publicly accessible drinking locations. And Disneyland, of course, gave way to another popular theme park franchise, Six Flags. It was on August 1st, 1961, that Six Flags Over Texas, which was the creation of oilman and developer Angus Wynn Jr., opened in Arlington, Texas, and it focused on the theme of Texas history. And it got its name because Texas has literally seen 6 flags thrown over it. Those flags, if you're wondering, were Spain, France, Mexico, Texas as a republic, Texas when it was in the Confederacy, and Texas as part of the United States. Each section of the park focused on one of the 6 cultures that helped shape the state throughout its history, including France, Spain, Mexico, the Confederacy, the constantly evolving American culture, and Texas itself. The rides and attractions reflected Texas's unique heritage and agriculture, industry, and a melting pot of Southern and Spanish culture. And Six Flags is the world's largest regional theme park company, operating 30 properties in North America as well as multiple amusement parks around the globe. And I hope you have enjoyed our time together. I hope you enjoyed learning about amusement parks in this country. Thank you for the time. Goodbye and God bless. And please wait for the cart to come to a complete stop before exiting. Thank you. Have a good day. And I would also like to thank people at Yesterday's America, RoyalCaribbean.com, and Bloomberg.com for the information used to create this episode.